Hello, can you hear me? I'm not sure. I don't know if you can hear me right. Okay.
How are you guys? How was this week? Spotlight or non-spotlight related. So you can tell me anything. Was this a good week? It's Friday, so
It was a long one for me.
good long one or bad long one?
No, it was good. I feel incredibly tired, like my energy is completely drained, but I believe that I accomplished, yeah, probably 2 or 3 like big interesting things for me and my team. So yeah, it doesn't feel like it was a good one, but in retrospective, I have to say that it was a really good one.
That's exactly how right. If you're not tired, it feels weird. When was the last time you were completely like super fresh? I can't remember. The super fresh.
I guess.
Fix my audio. Microphone B cable, yeah.
Yeah,
Hey y'all, great to see you again. Were you checking your mics?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Alex. Seems to be working, right? Cool. It would be definitely useful for all of you to leave your cameras on, even your mics, if that doesn't bother the whole conversation, so that you can chip into the discussion. You're in good hands and great company next.
hey Carlos.
Hey. How are you guys doing?
Great. Super great.
What is the latest?
Well, we've started. We're in week 2, 3. I can't even remember.
Week 2.
Of Spotlight this year.
Are we waiting for more people?
Well, primarily we were waiting for you, so I think we're just gonna let people in as soon as they join the waiting room. So if you're ready, we can get the ball rolling.
So what are we doing?
We're doing a Q&A session with you.
Uh-oh.
Short intro, if that's still necessary, but no, we'll do a short intro. I'll probably stress you out with 1 or 2 questions, but the questions are actually expected from the teams. So the beginning will be focused on that intro and questions, and then at the end, 10-15 minutes maybe for a separate interview. We'll see how that goes. If there might be no need for a separate interview when we're asking the teams not to ask questions for 10-15 minutes. If the questions, I'm pretty sure the conversation will be bubbly enough, so we'll see how that goes. If we do need the 10 minutes of let's say private questions, just us, the How to Web team and you, that'll be fantastic to have you. And I know you've got a hard stop at 3:30 UK time, so 5:30 Romania time.
Nice.
Cool.
Well, I have to apologize in advance. I literally have not eaten all day, and I'm just trying to ram some food down my throat right now, so my blood sugar is at the highest with you guys.
Great. So
Chipping in with some coffee as well. So yeah,
Mm.
bring on all the good stuff that you all have. Thanks for
Yes.
joining.
Is Bogdan on the call, by the way?
Bogdan is not here. But if there's anything you'd like to tell him, we're pretty. We'll just make.
No. Send my regards.
We'll
Always
do-
good
we'll
seeing.
do.
Always good seeing old friends. So off to you, Joanna. Whatever you want.
Perfect. Congrats on winning the Investor of the Year award, and congrats on everything you've done in the last, well, years, months, weeks, days. So just it's absolutely fantastic to hear whatever is new at Seedcamp. So as you know, guys, and I'm talking to the founders right now, Carlos has been not just a How to Web friend, but a regular speaker, mentor, podcast host, writer. You've all got access to everything that, well, not everything, but the Carlos in a nutshell. So I hope that you've done a bit of research in regards to what you can discuss with him today. But broadly, looking at, of course, what Carlos is and wearing the investor hat, how does he look at teams when making the investment decision, product market fit, building products and tech teams, anything granular in regards to term sheets, cap table, valuation. So anything that, you know, is a burning issue for you, the teams, you can ask Carlos. Literally, his experience is broad, to say the least, and his fundraising stories are unique and diverse. So, Carlos, if you don't mind, after you, when you can, just for a quick intro in regards to how would you describe what you do, what's your current focus, how are things at Seedcamp right now, and what you're looking for in regards to founders?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure meeting you all. You know, it's funny. I know that most of us are not coming out of COVID, but some things like Zoom calls, group Zoom calls will continue to be part of our lives probably for a long time until Oculus gets their act together and we can all have virtual get-togethers. And so with that, the thing that will make this even more fun is the more engaging that we make this. So, you know, Rafael, you know, I want to hear your story. Alina, I want to hear your story. You know, George, I see you. It'd be great to hear your story. And we can make this two ways. I think at the end of the day, what I do isn't like some glorified thing. What I do is I just help founders in their journey to get to where they need to get to or they want to get to. That's it. That's what I do.
That's fantastic. Actually, some of the question I think you've been addressed the most throughout the years is exactly that. What are you looking for when you meet a founder? When you first get, you know, the first interaction, from that first interaction. And I think I'm primarily interested in those soft skills that maybe fewer people are talking about. Everybody's obviously on the expertise, on the business experience, but what are the soft skills?
What?
Michael will have to put in like
Okay.
1,000 signatures for all the users.
Why?
Because each user signs an agreement, like a shareholding agreement with the
I think we
CLG.
have we should make our microphones off. Okay.
That was pretty interesting. What's going on there?
We're sharing some secret recipe, you know. I just don't want to be in trouble for disclosing some, you know, secret material of their success.
I agree, Sandro. This is how people get killed, you know. They hear something they're not supposed to. Well, okay, so
it is recorded, so
exactly. You know, you got to be careful. Well, okay, so let's start with each one of you and kind of what the relationship is with an investor. Your fundraising journey is really a series of conversations with people who are going to help you. That's what it is at the end of the day. So I think what I look for in founders isn't necessarily like the interesting angle. It's what do you look for in investors? And what are the things that you like in a world where money's increasingly becoming common? What are you looking for in an investor? Then within that subset, there's some investors that are going to see in you what you see in them. And so I know it's not answering a question, Joanna, it's kind of flipping it a little bit, but it's like what I see in a founder is irrelevant because to some extent, all of you have some element of that. It's whether or not you're able to connect that element with an investor you're speaking to. So maybe another way of asking the question is, what are the sort of attributes that a team might have, or what are the attributes of an interaction that can highlight a possible relationship? And so when you look at the first interaction you have with an investor, it's no different than the first interaction you have with a romantic partner, right? Like you're trying to figure each other out. There's a lot of things you probably aren't saying. There's probably a lot of things you wish you could say, but you don't know how to. And I think really what you should try to optimize for is trying to get very quickly across what level of expertise you have in what you're building. So identifying your founder market fit very quickly to an investor. And so it's, why am I the right person for this particular business? The second thing is like, why have I surrounded myself with amazing people that are going to make this business possible? Now, this is stuff you've probably heard many times before. Like this isn't like rocket science, probably 500 blog posts written about this. But the tricky thing is, how do you manage that relationship? How do you build a pipeline of people you're talking to where you rank how that relationship went? Because it's a two-way street. So I wrote a blog post. I don't know if you find it there, but it's like managing your fundraising pipeline is a blog post that I wrote that has like a Google sheet that you can fill out. And I think what you need to think about is, if every single investor conversation is a possibility for having a long-term relationship, where does that rank as a relationship relative to other conversations I've had? Did I get value from them? Did they get value from me? Did answers I gave resonate with them or not? And you go through it, you think about and reflect on every single one of those interactions, and you think about what things you said that made the investor feel disconnected from you, so that you can improve on for the next relationship that you're going to meet. Because the other thing is, you're not the same person when you're pitching your first investor to the time you're pitching your 10th investor. So we've seen founders go through a journey of like the first 3 pitches are like not horrible, they're just not knowing how to calibrate, like what things to talk about, what not things to talk about. By the time you're in the 30th pitch, you could have talked to that first investor and had an entirely different experience. Like that would have gone entirely differently. And so that's why it's not even an easy question to answer, because think about your friendships. You know that some of your friends that you met when you're in your 20s, you wouldn't have been friends with in your 30s, and so that's why it's the best way to do this is to not have it be about an investor, what they're looking to founder or what a founder, it's about what you both get from that relationship. Write it down as a list of potential relationships, and then rank them like, hey, how did this feel? How did it not feel? Can this add value? Can they not add value? And that's hopefully a lot more constructive longer term than like overthinking any one investor relationship or any one investor engagement, because it will vary depending on where you are in your life, what many meetings you had before, what mood you're in. And so that can vary too much.
From a pragmatical point of view, what would you say is, or from your own point of view, what would you say is the best approach when it comes to these follow-on meetings? So you've had the first meeting with the investor, and then it's a no for this time being. When is the moment when the founder should reach out again, and what sort of updates are good to have? And would it be after 2 weeks, after a month, after 1 year? How would you feel that's a significant update that you've heard from a founder?
Yeah, Alex, by the way, I love the video stream. That is like commitment right there, man.
The video is okay, the sound is awful. So
yeah, no, it's good. It's good. All right, so the question is, you've had one meeting and you think that the investor is ghosting you. Is that what it is? and then you're trying to figure out, how can I get them to re-engage? How can I get follow-up? How can I get, is that maybe paraphrasing your question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So who at the moment is fundraising in this call?
Me.
Okay,
Everybody.
a lot of them. Irina's like, I got all the money I want.
Pretty much everyone. Yeah.
Everybody except Irina, apparently. Okay, so everybody's raising money. How many people feel that they are currently ghosted by an investor? So it's somebody that you would love to engage with further, but you're not feeling like there's an engagement there. You might have had one engagement already, but you're really struggling with a follow-up. Raise your hand. Yeah, I think we all have that. You know, when we go fundraising, we have that. I think so. First of all, it's just coming to terms with there's tons of things that are going on in someone's life, and I think it's you have to remember that just like you guys are busy, investors are busy, and this is not a defense for investors. It's not. It's just like I think part of it is the empathy that any outbound communication you have with somebody is going to be received depending on where they are in their day, their life, what's going on. And so it's very easy to over index, like, oh, did I do something wrong? Did I send the wrong thing? Was it too fast? Was it too, you can never optimize. There is no right solution. There's no right formula. So there's a little bit of karmic influence on this serendipity. So the reason why I start with that is because it's so easy to get anxious about it. You know, it's so easy to be like, fuck, should I do more? Should I do less? What is around? And that stuff can eat away at your life. Don't let it. The next thing is, if you talk to an investor and it went well, like there's an interest engagement, but there is no clarity on whether they're going to do any next step. It might be because you didn't leave it at a very clear position. It's like, okay, what is next steps for you? Or what would you like to see to re-engage? You know, like you definitely want to leave your first or few conversations with enough clarity to know either I am going to do something with you in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or I need to keep you updated when I hit A, B, C, and D. If you find yourself in that you're ghosted, but you didn't ask those questions in your first meeting, then yeah, you are in a bit of a limbo because you don't know whether you're being ghosted because there's no follow-up internally for the investor, or if they felt you weren't far along, but you didn't get clarity on where you would need to be. Right. So I think first of all is make sure that every single meeting you have ends with an actionable trajectory. It might be not now, maybe later. And then you say, okay, great. When would be later? And then you know, they might say, well, when you have traction, when you have customers, when you have product, when you have a UI, whatever. And you're like, okay. And then just don't bother, just don't email until you have it. And then when you have it, be like, hey, this is what I have. And then you're like, let me know if you'd be interested in a meeting. And if they say, great, then hey, mission accomplished. So you can become the victim of your own ambiguity if you don't ask for a call to action. And if you find yourself in that position, it is a little awkward to reignite, but hopefully just think about sort of the next call to action at the end of a meeting, then you at least can understand yes or no, or what I need to do next.
Thanks, Carlos. Before I address the questions, do you guys have any questions? Who wants to go first? Shoot.
Cyprian.
Hi, Carlos.
Can I go?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Then don't forget to raise your hand in the in Zoom. So that
Mihai is day trading over there. Closing deals, Mihai. All right, who's asking the question first?
Ioana, shoot.
Thank you. So I agree with your points on raising any follow-on steps. But what happens when investors already tell you yes, or maybe yes, I'm just waiting for one more thing, and then they drag along and they say, oh, I'll tell you next week, and then it keeps happening. That's an issue that we've been dealing with in the past month. And in my opinion, we just had to put a foot in the door and say, look, this is the price now. You want to come later, you have to come at a higher price. And
what's stopping you from doing that? Is it just the
So-
anxiety of losing them?
Yes, initially, yes, but that's what we are doing now. And it did work with some, but with some still didn't. So
At some point, you need to move on. I mean, we had one investor who wanted to invest in our fund, and it just took longer and longer and longer. And the actual delay ended up being 8 months. But we just went ahead and closed without them. So if I had kept on waiting, it would have been an additional delay of 8 months. It just wasn't worth it. But every single conversation was, it's imminent, it's imminent, it's imminent. So I think you did the right thing, which is at some point you need to decide what's best, and there's a risk. And that's your question paraphrased is, I may not have any other options, or I may be able to have a bigger round if I wait for this person, but they're dragging their feet. What do I do? And the thing is, at some point, you just need to like take a risk, and there's an opportunity cost of not making that decision, which is getting going. Cyprian.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Carlos. I'm Ciprian from SenseTask. So we're, in short, we're a cloud-based platform that processes documents using AI. I have a question. I see your background is from the States now. I lived in the States for a long time too, and in California, I actually started a startup there. Now, the startup landscape in Europe, especially Romania, is a lot different than US and California. So for us, raising pre-revenue was really a challenge. Now we did that through a grant. We got like a small round. Now we reached revenue. One of the things that I keep hearing from investors was that our approach doesn't necessarily target a vertical, right? It's more like a horizontal solution. You can find use cases in any industry has documents. Now, I remember Seedcamp was one of the early investors in UiPath. Now, UiPath, RPA, like intelligent document processing, is a horizontal solution. I know UiPath probably focused more on BPO in the early stages. Their first customers were in that segment. But it seems to me that investors in Europe are looking for more sort of like focused and maybe mitigating the risk, maybe, I don't know, but I would appreciate some feedback on comments and regarding that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. First of all, Ciprian, you and I have more in common than you think. I am Latin American. I am from Honduras.
Okay. Okay.
Like Romanian, it's a romantic language. I just speak with an American accent because I watched a lot of American TV. So
okay,
I
see.
definitely this is why I love Romania. I feel like it's like my home in Europe. So with regards to your question, it's a very good question. It's there's a couple of things that you kind of mixed in there a little bit, which is
You're right.
You mixed in a question about whether or not like European investors have a partiality to one vertical versus horizontal, or horizontal versus vertical versus American investors. That's if there ever was such a thing, that's changing to the point where it's now irrelevant for the best investors. I don't know that that's the geography is the reason why certain things aren't invested in. So let's park that one for a second. So you don't like, I'm in the wrong continent. That stuff is now changed. Like when Daniel Dina started, yeah, it might have been actually more of an issue, but now he's paved the way for so many different founders to be able to succeed, because a lot of US funds are coming here desperately to find the next UiPath. So that's not an issue, right? So park that one. Now let's go to the second question, which is vertical versus horizontal. So when you're starting a company and you have no idea what the unit economics are going to be for your product, you're taking guesses, right? And the investors also taking guesses, and they're taking guesses on what your cost of acquisition will be relative to how much you can charge. And I think where vertical can sometimes be, it all depends on your bias, right? If your bias is that it's very hard to get any kind of sales done, the more vertical you are, the more efficient your sales will be. So the lower your CAC will be, And therefore, from a sort of certainty of outcome, I could argue, this is like a debate club thing. You could argue that vertical is more likely to succeed, or it's easier, or whatever, entirely just based on the unit economics, right? But there's a counter argument. The counter argument is that horizontal, yeah, it might, like if you look at, UiPath, there is a sales team, right? And there is some sales engineering and group of people who have to think about how to deploy these things. So yeah, maybe there is a higher cost of sale, but there's such a broader market that you make up for it with much larger levels of sales and much larger contracts. So the LTV CAC ratio is very, very positive in UiPath, right? And so I think it's not a conversation about vertical versus horizontal. It's how is the LTV to CAC ratio look like for your industry in a vertical or in a horizontal? Because in some cases you might say, well, it's best to be horizontal, but it turns out that that horizontal is only valuable in one of the verticals that the horizontal powers. So the reason why people are not interested is because there's only one use case, and making it available to all these other people is charity. And so you're just wasting your time by having a platform that many people can use, but only one person is really, I'm going to exaggerate this, right? It's as if you made a weapons platform that was horizontal, that people could hire. Only the military is going to use it. So, it's a vertical. It's a weapons platform for the military. That would be the vertical explanation. The horizontal one would only have one customer anyway. It would be the military and maybe the police force. And so it's pointless to have it be horizontal, because you're going to spend a lot of time trying to get other customers on there, and they're not going to, it's going to take you a lot more to get them. So I think it's not, I sort of answered your question in the sense that it's not that there's a bias with one versus another, or that, like people are short-sighted. I think you need to dig deeper into your analysis and be like, okay, is this because there's a perception that there isn't enough value in the horizontal across multiple different use cases, and that a vertical would be a more efficient unit economic business?
Yeah.
That just
Thank you.
one of the questions that the founders are quite frequently asking in regards to their deck is, how should they build up the market size slide? So what would you say are, what would make a clear and sort of not easy to understand, but in a way, what are your criteria when looking at that slide? All
right, so let's play with this. Who here feels like when presenting to investors, the reason why you get stuck is because of perception of market size? Raise your hand. All right, Marion, go for it. Pitch me your company and tell me. I'll try to gauge your market size based upon how you pitch it. Go for it.
Right. Hi. So we are Verk, and we are connecting the 185 million unlisted construction workers to construction companies worldwide. And how we are doing this is that we are creating a community that where the workers can connect with each other. They can share references to jobs wherever they are, and they can apply to verified employers in whichever country they are.
Okay, that's very clear. So when you've gotten pushback on the market size, give us examples of why the investors have thought that the market size is small.
They have actually thought that we are too optimistic with the market size. We are creating a totally new channel to get to the construction workers, which means that our competitors on the market at the moment are also our customers. The middlemen who are sending construction workers to construction companies, they don't have a channel to reach the workers directly, but they can through our community. So we are doing both. We are directly sending workers to companies, but we are also sending workers to this middleman. So this kind of increases our market size.
So how many workers did you say? 185 million?
In the world, yes. We are initially targeting Europe.
Yeah. So there's two ways. There's a cool blog post by Christoph Jans around, there's two ways to build $1 million revenue company, right? It's either a million customers each paying $1, or one customer paying $1 million, right? It's pretty obvious, simple math, right? And 185 million construction workers is a lot of money if you charge them one for every transaction. Maybe you're not charging them, you're charging the employer, whatever.
Yeah.
If you monetize $1 for 185 million worldwide, that's 185 million. Now, is it $1? It's probably more. You could probably charge more for each contract. So it goes back to this idea that if you want to equal 185 million in annual revenue, which is near where like UiPath is, right? So if UiPath makes that amount of revenue annually, and you have 185 million construction workers, and I divide that by 5, right? That would be 37 million that I would have to, 37 million construction workers that I would have to charge $5 to, right? And so at some point, they're equal. 185 is both 37 times 5 or 185 times 1. And then I can cut that even further. I can say, how many construction workers are in Romania?
I don't know about Romania, but in Europe, we're targeting about 7 million.
7 million. All right. So 185 divide by, it would be 185 million. 105, 123, 123, divide by 7, 123, 7, 123, 123. So you have to figure out a way how to charge $26 per transaction. And then it doesn't matter. And so here's the thing about this whole market size question. Market size is a sloppy term for how many people can I charge X amount for, right? And so in your case, if you charge the global construction workers $1, it'd be the same as the European construction workers for 26. Now, the point it becomes too optimistic is the moment where there is absolutely no possible way for you to charge 26 in that transaction. If there's absolutely no way, like it just doesn't work, then it's too optimistic. So that's the trick. It's not necessarily how big a number is that you put on a slide. It's when you do the math of getting to a 200 million annual revenue business, or like if you want to be like a UiPath and you look at those numbers of annual revenue, okay, how do you get there? I mean, 100, you can get there with 185. If you had the entire construction worker industry paying one, you could get there. But that's, we all know that's not realistic. So you divide that by the European one, which may be more realistic. And then you multiply it by the 26 and you end up at the same thing. But then you need to ask yourself, like, is that viable? And I'll give you a good example of what I mean by this is viable. Spotify had the challenge that when they were fundraising and when they were launching to their customers, they were competing with CD sales. And many of you probably don't even remember buying CDs, but there was a time when music came in little discs and you had to buy them, And so those were worth about like $11 to $15. And they were like an analogous pricing barrier for people. They're like, I'd rather buy this physical thing than pay this platform to use their music, even though it's unlimited. I'd rather just buy it because I'm going to listen to 1 CD or 2 CDs. So they had an artificial ceiling of selling music per month at like $10. The moment it went over $10, people would rather just go and buy the CD rather than subscribe to the service. And that was the psychology of people at the time for the music industry, right? So the same thing goes for your construction industry. Like there's a contract between a construction worker and a construction firm, and that might be worth $100 a day, might be worth $1,000. I don't know what it is. But taking a cut of that transaction has a limit. That limit is the moment when it's so ridiculously expensive that it's not even close to like if it's $100 a day for a construction worker and you're taking 26 of it just to enable that to happen, they'd say, fuck it, I'll do this on paper, right? But there's a point when it becomes easier to do it on your platform than on paper. And that might be at $2 or $3. Okay, so $185 million divided by 3, where does that get me? right? That's like around 60. I need to find 60 million construction workers. Okay, how do I get 60 million construction workers? Like how much is going to cost me to acquire them? And then you have to take that away from your total revenue, because it's not just, you know, free revenue. And can you be profitable on that? And so that's the math that you need to think about when you're building your market. There isn't any inherent market that is too small. It's how much you can charge it that matters, right? Like if you had a customer of one and you charge them a shit ton of money, still a pretty big market, right? Because that's, I mean, if you look at companies like Blackwater, I think it is, you know, they're the contractor that the government uses for like, you've all seen enough movies to know what I'm talking about. It's like the contractors the government brings in after soldiers leave, right? They've got one contract, it's the government, you know, but that's a massive contract. And so that's another way of thinking about the market size thing. It's like, it isn't just about putting a large number up there.
You mean FEMA?
FEMA's another one, yeah. Yeah, there's several, right? But it's just an example. I think you get the point, Alina, right? Like you have one contract that's massive. I mean, it might be incredibly hard to get that contract, right? In which case you would need to finance. I mean, I'm exaggerating to make the point. Like, I don't think anybody in this room is probably going for like a one customer, you know, globally, but it's to make the point.
Well, just a quick follow-up question is that right now we're showing just European TAM on our slide. Should we also include the world, or European is enough?
I think that one thing that Daniel Giants did really well is showcase how companies coming from wherever they are based can be global players. And I think that you need to reflect on what you're building. Is it a local play thing or is it a global play thing? And don't lie to yourself and don't lie to the other people, right? It's like there are some companies who benefit from localized subsidies or regulation, and therefore is not so obvious that it's a software scalable thing across the world, right? But for example, if you are a software for calculating weight loss, for example, other than language, there's nothing really that stops you from expanding into other markets very quickly. But if you are a platform for telemedicine, you might be regulated in the telemedicine by country, which means that you need to look at it incrementally. Like what? So it varies on the segment, and I don't know the construction segment enough to know whether this is something that could be software. You know, it's easy or not. Joanna Surdu Bob said, yes, I agree. So next question, Alexandru.
Hi. So thank you so much for your advice so far and insights. It's been great. I have this question related on relationship building versus, you know, the spray and pray approach. And I'm just on very early stage, and we've been talking to only a couple of investors. But what I try to pull off is to try to build a relationship with the people that seem to have some interest in what we do, right? Because there are some people that are, you know, simply signaling that we are out of their league, like they are looking at further stages or, you know, later stages, and then those we don't follow up on. But the people that that have a conversation with us and share some thoughts, we try to follow up and show them that, you know, we really took their advice and thoughts into consideration, and we act on part of those, and then we try to build a relationship. Would that work? I mean, is this a good approach, or?
I think you have the right idea. I mean, you weren't specific. I mean, I'm assuming you're referring to like investor relationships, right? Like
yeah. I'll give an example. I had a conversation with an investor that said, in short, that the problem is not there, and I should find something better to do with my time, right? So then I deconstructed in the conversation, and I reached to the point in which, you know, I said, what would be the proof that the problem is there, right? And assumingly, if we have the proof, you'd be more interested in this. And he said, you know, you didn't learn a lot about the problem in the market, so then you could not pitch it to me, you know, or describe the problem in detail. So then now I started building a relationship, showing him that we're somehow pushing the learning button more and trying to learn from the market, and he's quite engaged with it, right? So, and I'm not sure if this is wasted time because he signed in the beginning that he's not interested, or he's not a big believer in the idea anyway, right? And then I should stop and not, spend time into, following up with him. Or if it's right that I'm doing this because he might turn into a lead, like an investor lead, and he might be interested in investing, right? That's the question.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So let's start with one thing, right? Like everybody in this room has a personality, right? Like everybody has ways of asking questions, making statements. Like I've analyzed my personality, as sure as you guys have. And I know, for example, I like to sometimes find exaggerated examples to make a point. And I call that bookending. I say, it's this or that. And it just helps sometimes create an image of something here in the middle, right? If you don't set those bookends, sometimes things can go in opposite directions and nowhere. And that's a linguistic tool that I use sometimes when I'm giving feedback. I've noticed that other investors have other ways of doing things, and some can be even borderline rude, right? And I don't think it's investors in general. I think it's everyone. I think we all do it in different ways. It's our interface. I know some founders who can be very rude, or it can be very blunt, or it can be very condescending in some ways, as much as an investor can be. I think that's people. That's a people problem. Now, as you guys know, if you have a sort of a personality, and then you're putting in a position of making decisions, sometimes that amplifies how it comes across. And what I'm hearing, Alexander, is a two-part problem. One is figuring out if it's a personality issue, and that person just has a blunt interface, but intrinsically, they're a person who likes to challenge other people with a good spirit, right? So I think it's, if I know that some people have a tolerance for that and some people don't, right? Like, so for example, I've been told in my life that I can't do something, and sometimes it fires me up and sometimes it puts me down. Like, it's not, I would love to be able to tell you in all honesty that sometimes when somebody says I can't do something, that the first thing that pops in my mind is like, I'm going to show you you're wrong, right? Like, it isn't always. Sometimes I'm like, oh, fuck, maybe I'm doing something wrong, right? And so I think you need to first of all decide, is this person using this as a linguistic tool to challenge me? Or is this person just a jerk who doesn't believe in me and said something relatively sort of limiting to me, right? And once you decide, it just helps you frame every single other conversation you have with that person. Because then you're not dealing with somebody who's a hater, you're dealing with somebody who's a challenger, and that can be a good thing. It's always good to have someone who challenges you, and you just have to get used to the way they do it, right? Which then brings me to the second part of your question, which is you've taken the challenge. You've said, let me prove you wrong. Let me prove you wrong. And if these guys have a reputation for investing in the criteria or in your sector and in your stage, there's a sort of record trail of this might not be a waste of time, right?
Yeah, they have the track record, and this is why I'm following up, of course. What I'm still not trying to decide or to see is whether that person is really more or less a jerk or someone who just challenged me, and because people, the perception of the people around can be so different. So then, this is not a clear answer. It's not a clear call.
Yeah. And that's where you are taking a calculated risk. To me, it sounds like the fact that this person is continuing to engage with you with your answers is probably more positive than negative. The question is, I don't know, is that if you have to calibrate, is that are you getting, and if you can talk to any founders that they've worked with, you might get a sense also for their personality, whether that's a tool for challenging. Because some of the best people who've coached me in my life or others just challenge you. It's not like yes, yes, yes. Sometimes it's a couple no's can go a long way.
Okay. Super. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right.
I had
who's
a
next?
second question, but I will just.
Yeah, we'll come back just so that everybody
Yeah,
gets,
yeah. Okay.
Sandro was waiting for a while.
Yeah. So Sandro from Colombia, building from Lithuania. We're building an interactive TikTok for language learning. We're on the B2B part. We're going to be launching on the B2C soon. We're going to close this year with 35K of revenue. Half of that is MRR. So following your idea of, this is about dating a little bit. I've been dating, and I've got a lot of no's, which I believe is good because they're being like straightforward no's, and a couple of somewhat yes. And, it's like exciting. I don't want to mess it up, right? I'm just a guy in front of a VC trying to get money. But one of the things that's got me thinking is that I don't quite really know why they said no. And by this, I mean is that this, and I've been pitching to European VCs. I do not know whether they think I'm just bullshitting my way through this, or there are no cues for me to let me know, what's going on here, right? Is he thinking that I'm just like, reading a script and that I'm not like transparent? So I'm a little bit lost about the no's. Because I don't know, at least my intention, my impression is that there is kind of a cultural distance between them and I. So I have two ideas on that. The first one is like just go and date as many people and fail, and just become like very promiscuous in a matter of speaking, so that I will accelerate that learning curve. Or just have fewer dates and try to go for very direct feedback about probably being obnoxious. Because right now my concern is that I'm a virgin on this game. I want to lose my virginity, but of course with someone that would treat me right.
This is when a metaphor has gone a little too far, right? Like
sorry, it's Friday.
It served its purpose, and then now you're like TMI.
It's Friday, sorry.
All right. So first of all, I'm going to ask you to pitch yourself again, because I'm taking notes in the chat channel so everybody can see it. And sure. I think I understood as interactive TikTok for learning for enterprise. But
for language learning, yeah.
For language learning.
All
right, but pitch it again.
Sure. We are building the future of mobile learning. We're starting with English because it's a $1.5 billion people issue, right? It's $5 billion a year problem. We started building in Colombia, where we have access to a B2B business of $17 million. We're going to be launching a B2C part of the business soon to give us balance on our income flow. Our unfair advantage is a recommender system that different to what the market does, recommends based on what people likes and not on thinking that they're just bricklayers that are building just a small wall and throws them words and games of words. That is the product.
Okay. So you're Colombian?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Latin power.
Yeah, but that's now that you mentioned it, that's very wrong, because some VCs, or I read them in their faces that they're so excited because they're somehow like thinking that I'll be super excited about building for Latin America in this space, and I am not. I do believe that the opportunity is elsewhere, at least the largest and the most interesting in the short term. But anyways, that's a different conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So you had a multi-threaded question there. Is a little bit trying to understand why you get no's, a little bit about how many investors you should talk to figure out why you're getting no's, and then of course it's like what it is that you do. I would say that, I mean, the spirit, I know this is being recorded, which is a little bit unfortunate in some ways because it means it's harder to be You want to how?
It's recorded, but it's not public material. It's recorded for Teams purposes. So
Okay, so only the people on this call get to see it.
only, yeah. It's on a private channel. It won't be public.
Okay, I mean it's more for Sandra's benefit rather than for my benefit. But the reason why is because I presume you guys have known each other now for a while. This isn't the first time you guys are all together, right?
It's not. No.
That's right.
No, okay. So I assume that there's some level of comfort with each other, and you guys each know what each other's working on.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
And it's week 2, but we had several interactions so far. Yeah.
So what's important here is, Sandra, is that as with most things, the question you're asking has some elements of it that you're not asking, and it's because it's hard sometimes for us to like look at ourselves from a distance. And as I heard you ask the question, I was still stuck on what you did, and then I asked you to repeat it again, and it left me with a lot of additional questions. And so the problem is that there's a second order issue there, which is why are you getting no's, or how effective are your chats are a function of how effective you are at communicating what you do. And so it's almost like you can't solve for one until you solve for the other. And you can't storytell on one until you storytell on the other. And so I think what we can do very quickly is kind of play with that, because I feel like if you get that, then you can isolate why there's a no. So for example, with Seedcamp, when we fundraise, because we have to fundraise similar to you guys, there was a time when we weren't really sure if we were saying, oh, we're doing too many companies or too little companies in terms of how many investments we made per year. But then we get comfortable with how to tell that story. And we knew that any single rejection that happened was either because they didn't believe us or because they believed in us. But it was no longer about, am I saying the right thing? The problem you have right now is you've asked me these two extremes. Am I saying, like, do they believe me? Do they not believe me? But what you don't have clarity on is, am I saying the right thing? My opinion, you're not saying the right thing. My opinion is that you're leaving a lot of room here. And with that much variability, it's like a science experiment gone wrong. You don't have any control variables. So you can never tell, why am I getting these no's? You will never be able to tell, how many investors do I talk to, many or few, because you will never know what those no's are coming from, right? So that's my opinion. Now, you know, the one thing that I have with years of experience is just listening to presentations, right? That's it. I wouldn't say I'm better at product than you guys or market, nothing. It's the only thing I do day in, day out is listen to people tell me what they're working on. That's it, right? And so I calibrate how quickly I get it versus how quickly I don't get it. And it's like the people who are really master storytellers get there faster. The ones who are struggle with storytelling get there slower, right? And so all I can tell you is there's room for improvement. So for example, I'm going to play a little game with you right now. I'm going to present back to you what I think I understood you do, but I'm going to add some salsa to it, right? And that salsa is to amplify some of the elements that maybe you're trying to tell me, but you're not telling me, right? And then if you anchor that, then maybe that's where you can start pitching again, right? I'll give you that. I know since we're talking dating metaphors, I'm going to use the dating metaphor one more time.
Go ahead.
It's the equivalent of, why am I getting rejected all this time? I say the right things, I make the right jokes, and you overanalyzing one element of it, but you don't realize that you're dressing funny. And the problem isn't what you're saying, it's that you have a big distracting orange giraffe on your shirt, you know, that everyone's distracted by, right? And so that's why it's important to isolate all the variables first, and then you move into, why am I getting no's? Why am I getting this? Why am I getting that? Does that make sense?
It very much does, yeah.
Okay, cool. So now let's move on to the presentation. So what I understood you do, I wrote it down, is that you see yourself as the future of mobile learning. You're starting with the English language, and your first clientele is going to be B2B, which later you'll go into B2C, and that you work on a recommending system where you're not just putting random words like such and such went to the grocery store. You're more specifically tailoring it for the words of interest. Is that right?
Almost, yeah.
Okay, what part did I get wrong?
Yeah, the last part, the recommender system.
Okay, what part of it did I get wrong?
Because I didn't explain it well. It's a rather complex AI explanation.
Okay, but
So,
just tell me like
can-
what's the outcome
Yeah.
of it? Is that
Yeah,
I have
so-
better
so-
selection of language.
Yeah, so you look at all the competitor landscape, you look Duolingo, just name
Yeah.
it, build any other one. They all look at people in one way and
Yeah.
only one way. They think that language learners are bricklayers.
Yeah.
And their value proposition is the following. It's easy. We're going to give you the bricks, the words. We're going to show you how to put the bricks together, right? Just don't worry, 15 minutes a day. And then they leave you alone and tell you, go and build a Great Wall of China. Bye-bye. And that's what everybody is getting. And that vision of the competition reflects on
that part of it is still confusing. All right, give me another example.
Okay, so when you go and download any app for language learning, you get one of two things. Tutoring, where you need to actually pay to get in contact with somebody, right? Or you get vocabulary games, right? And that is the vocabulary games part is because they're giving you a recommendation based on natural language processing, right? But we are actually trying something different. That is giving you recommendations the very way Amazon is giving you recommendations when you're browsing for things to buy. We want to know what you love, what you like, what gets you excited. And then we'll get you, instead of buying, we will get you to learn.
Okay. Okay, great. There's actually quite a bit of here to work with. So now I'm going to pitch it back to you, okay? Sandro, you're the investor and I'm Sandro.
Yeah.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah.
So, my name is Sandro. I'm from Colombia. And one of the interesting things that I've learned from where I work is that English is the dominant language of business globally. And a lot of companies hire employees around the world who English is their second language. Now, one of the challenges that they have is learning it in an efficient fashion. And whilst there are many different players out there who have language learning apps like Duolingo and Busuu, what they optimize for is a general version of the language. What we've decided to do is a mobile-facing app, which makes it more approachable for all types of employees. And we focus explicitly on the vocabulary that is necessary for these employees to be effective in what they're doing sooner rather than later. So whereas other platforms focus on general use language like going to the cinema or buying groceries, what we're building allows an employer to be able to have their employees learn English with the right skills and the right language that is necessary for the day-to-day. In the future, we're hoping to launch a customer-facing app with the very same principles. And instead of using corporate language that is needed for an employer, it'll be based on their interests. So if you're into cycling, you'll learn all the cycling words from English first. If you're into cooking, you'll learn all the cooking words first. And we feel like language, if you learn it through what you love, you get there faster.
Yeah, that's good. Do you want to pitch for me? Can I ask you to, can I take you to my dates?
Just get the job.
That was a good one. That was a good one. A very good one. Yeah.
So if I had to pitch your company, I could probably fix it here and there. I could tweak it a little bit more, but at some point I'd be like, okay, this is as good as it's going to get. Like that people either like it or they don't. And I will find somebody who believes in it. Right. And then of course you have to talk about the pricing and all that. But I mean, that's like a separate conversation, right? But this is the problem, is that I listened to you and it was confusing and it wasn't clear where the value was and for who and like what was the value prop and why they would take you over the competitors. And you used metaphors that weren't like, the bricklayer thing. I wasn't entirely sure what you were referring to there. And so you have to be careful because then you don't know how to calibrate your rejections. And so anyway, so hopefully that helps. I mean, it's recorded, so you'll be able to play it back.
It did. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm not going to steal more of everybody else's time.
Yeah.
Can I also make a quick point?
Yeah, go ahead, Joanna.
So I don't know if this helps you, Sandro, but what I discovered that was the biggest issue when I was pitching was that I was pitching what we are doing now. So right now we are an investment platform for alternative assets like watches and wine. But was a mistake from my side, because what we actually need to pitch is the vision. Where are we going to be in 5 years? We're going to be the one-stop shop platform globally for alternative assets that allow anyone to diversify their portfolio. And this is how we are going to become the market leader. Now, because we are just pitching the current state and our numbers were still low in terms of traction based on our big vision, investors like, how are they going to get there? So I'm trying now to figure out how am I going to take these numbers a bit out of the center of the conversation and just sprinkle them whenever it's necessary.
So yes, that was a question, and it's how do I bridge my large global world domination plan with where I am at the moment?
I thought it was maybe just a comment regarding on why investors say no, because they cannot even see how big you can get, I think.
Yeah, so I'm going to phrase it as a question then. And I think that the homework falls on you. The homework is you incrementally share things about what you're building or where it will be so that you can bridge that disconnect. All right, who's next?
Let's see.
Katarina.
Yeah.
Hello from Croatia. Thank you very much for all the valuable insights. I'm taking the notes, and I do agree in many points, because sometimes it's about the value proposition. We have been through several accelerators, and the value proposition, what we've been working on. But our problem, I think now, it's not only the value proposition, because we are building a very niche professional product that people who are not in the industry, it's tourism industry, it's group travel, they are not aware that this problem exists. And our CEO is 27 years in that. I am 17 years in that. We know how huge it is. So the first thing that I think that there's a problem in our case, that it takes time. When I tell all the story, I can try to do it. So you tell me if the story is good or not. Normally it's not me pitching, but I remember what Dimitri is saying. And second thing about the market, I think in our case, because we are the travel tech, plus we are group travel, we are the most hit part in COVID. So first individual travel is rising, and after that the groups, right? And the numbers, what I had when I was pitching in 2019, I was having it's 51% of total available market. It's 192 billion. It's growing on CAGR average 4.8%, and it will continue growing. So right now I do not have this data. And when I pitch to investors, they tell, okay, but what is happening now? And we kind of don't know what's happening now, but I can just say, okay, you see individual market is coming back, so we cannot come back again. So this is the issues that we are, let's say, that I'm seeing that we are facing. That it's first the industry we are wrong, maybe, and second the
name of your
size
company?
of the market. Excuse me?
What's the name of your company?
D Groups. You invested in our competitors. I mean,
yes, that's
Da Vinci. Yes,
exactly.
we did. But it's a big difference between us. It's
no,
a big difference.
It's not that, partially because I was like, Da Vinci, but it's because I can share with you. I can share with you some anecdotes there.
Yes, please.
I mean, look, so I think COVID has hit some markets worse than others. I think every year there are companies that struggle and some that do well because of the circumstances we're in. And there's nothing I can say to make up for that. There's no wisdom I can say to make up for the context that we live in and the impact that has to the markets. And so all that does is that it puts pressure on you to have to tell a better story. And there's no way around it. So for example, when we were talking to Sandro, we were talking about language learning apps. Now, his has a unique angle. And that unique angle is the reason why he might be able to present. But otherwise, people would say that it's a saturated market. And presenting a company a saturated market is no different than presenting a company in a market that's hit by COVID. It's hard, right? And so I think some of the best stories about success have come out when people have succeeded when something is incredibly hard. but it doesn't mean that there's some magic bullet that can make it easier. And so I guess the first thing I'm going to say is, I don't know that knowing what I know about what's going on with Da Vinci and the impact that COVID had on them, and how hard it is to raise money for a travel company, no matter what you say, it's just harder, right? And so I think it's disingenuous for me to say, look, there's this thing you can say, or is this thing you can do, or the way of thinking about it, when in fact, collectively, there's a lot of investors who are just afraid. You know, the impact is fear, right? And so the thing is, every single market where there's something being affected is almost always where there's a rebound later. So mentally, you need to compartmentalize for the few investors who are looking at taking a big risk relative to what other people are thinking is too risky.
But how do you find them? Like, how do you find them? Because we're looking, you know, you invested in Da Vinci yourself. Like we started when you already invested, or we were in ITB Berlin, actually stand to stand, and they were shocked that we exist. We were shocked that they exist, because it's a huge problem. There is one difference between us. We are not eliminating DMCs, and we are not intermediators. We are facilitators. So direct bookings, direct negotiations. This is a difference.
No, I get that's a subtlety of the business model, which is important.
Yes.
But what I heard you say is, I get rejected even before that.
No, not really. We were about to get, we actually, we did well, I think, during the COVID times, because Phil Rouge Capital, the guys who are not from travel business, they invested second time in us in fall because of the team. And Julian said, okay, I'm not investing in anyone, but I'm giving you a help. But the COVID went too long, and I need to preserve the company, right? And I just put the cost low. I cannot scale. And now when they helped us, we were about to get a 500K investment from Day One Capital, because they were the buddies from Phil Rouge, and it was all going good. And then in March, we had conversation, and in March 2020, the whole group Gravel went to where it is still now. So we were not rejected then, but right now it's what you say. So this is what it is.
So your question really is, I feel like your question is, Katerina feels like the business in of itself is fine and has good opportunity, but I'm just struggling to find the investors who are willing to take a risk during this time. Because I can tell you right now, if I were looking at Da Vinci right now during COVID, I don't know that it would have been the same outcome. It wouldn't have been as obvious. So, like, when you bring up that we invested in Da Vinci, it was before COVID.
Yes, I saw.
And so I think it's important to, because the reason I keep on saying this is because I think it's important to be like, okay, got it. I understand, and I'm okay with the fact that I'm operating under suboptimal conditions. Fine, suboptimal conditions. So what I know there's 2 or 3 different investors out there who focus in travel on travel tech only.
Can you share some maybe?
So the thing to do is, you go to companies like PaceUp or others, and you go to Crunchbase, and you look on Crunchbase who their investors are, and then you research those investors as being travel tech investors. So I know that one of our companies, Pace, has done pricing for hotel rooms, right? Now, if you go to Crunchbase, I obviously can't tell you confidentially who their investors are, but if it's on Crunchbase, it's public information, so you can look for it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would do if I were you is I would just look at every single travel tech company that has gotten raising, find the Crunchbase listing, list all the investors, see who's still active and who's made deals in the last 6 months, because you can see that in TechCrunch, you can see that in Crunchbase, and then reach out to them. And that you have a subset of people who are very focused on that.
But for example, the investors, they would never, the last question, maybe it's also will be useful to the guys, the investors, they will not invest in the potentially competitive companies, right? Because they will need.
Yeah. But there's not that many. I mean, there's going to be more investors than there is going to be competitive companies.
Yeah, we have only 3. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the chat. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks. Let's go to Ilya. I know he's got at least 3 questions, so.
Ilya.
Yes. Hola, Carlos. ¿Qué tal?
Hola, hola, hola.
So I have a question. So I'm Ilya from BitScout, and we help project managers double their productivity by making their tools smarter. So the question that I have is, we're in pre-seed stage, and we are starting to raise together with this program. And I have feedback coming from investors regarding how should I reach the seed stage. And this feedback is polarized. So I get either this one or this one. One group of investors, or one group of feedback comes that I have to optimize for getting more paying users, even though it's 10 or 20, it's not a big number, but the point is they're all paying and they use the product. The second group is that I should switch to freemium model, get as much users as I can, because this number will look more impactful when I'm going to be raising the seed round. Provided we reach the same MRR, let's say seed round starts from 3K, I'm having doubts. Okay, because
to pitch me what you do, pitch me.
So we help project managers double their productivity by making their existing tools smarter. And we do that by allowing them to create ready-made no-code AI automations and add them to tools like Asana or Monday.
How would you monetize that? Like, is it on the number of automations per project manager?
Number of executions of an automation. So it's a transaction cost per use. One automation on average saves around 5 minutes. This is like a minimum. It can save more. For instance, one of the client doesn't have to read the documents anymore because we extract all the information and populate all the fields in his Monday board. So now they skip the reading and they save 5 minutes per transaction. We charge.
Wait, give me that example again. Give me that example again.
So the client that we have is a construction company, structural engineering. They receive their work orders as a PDF documents. The information about what to do, where to do, what's the date, what's the due date to get an answer is in a PDF. What we do is we allow them to create a quickly data extraction plugin that just gets this data into their Monday fields. And now the engineer doesn't have to read the PDF, they see everything in the field immediately in the task. It saves around 3 to 5 minutes per one incoming email, and they receive 20, 40 per day. And they pay us 20 cents per transaction and going down depending on the use. So if they use more, it goes down.
Do you know a company called Rossum?
Yes, I do.
So how do you feel like you're different than Rossum?
So Rossum, what they do is they try to train the model. So they take lots of documents, they load in the model, they train it, and then you enter a space of all the AI things and knowing how it works. We did a simple trick with the document extraction. You just open your document, you select the area which you want to get in the field, and that's it. And it means that you don't enter in the, oh, I have to put 1,000 documents here, use it there. I just did a couple of clicks and it works. And that's not the only thing that we do. It's just an example of one automation. So for instance, I can give you a continuation of the same client. What they asked us to do right now is to use that information that we extract to predict the effort. Because it's the next level. We can do that.
So they would predict it, or your platform would predict it?
Our platform would predict it.
Okay. So freemium is a funny one, because freemium, it depends on, like if you look at apps like Evernote or anything where there's some basic functionality and you're pricing the certain elements of it, can work when it's something that's very like broad-based consumer-facing product, because you can get a lot of organic growth because it's the kind of thing that people can adopt, play with, use occasionally. And then a subset of those people will be power users who need to pay. So if you're raising money and that's the kind of business you have, you can showcase very quickly a product market fit by the exponential rate of growth, right? And so, and then it can become, then you can have this latent view about what you could monetize. So for example, Hopin, one of our companies, they grew like crazy because people needed it. And then it was obvious that you could turn on the monetization later. With yours, the thing is that it's not obvious to me that the customer is, like, if you focused entirely on trying to get this to customers, it's not obvious that even if with all your energy, that it would be like the fastest growth rate in the world. Which then means that, like, relying on that as a way of showcasing success is going to limit you to not have something powerful and meaningful enough. Whereas monetizing some elements of it, it helps you price what things are so irritating to a project manager that it speeds up the whole process. And so I think this becomes a combination of how do you price, what do you price, and what percentage of your user base is willing to pay for that, you know? And so I don't think your business will ever have the metrics of growth that some of the B2C businesses will have to justify just an entirely free growth rate. It doesn't mean that you can't have a free element. I'm saying that I don't know that judging it on its free user base growth rate is the right one to use. I would judge the free user growth rate as an experiment to see what the pricing pain point is for the ones that need deeper automations.
Okay, understood. Well, we tested this, and I just got I got doubts as an early stage founder because I get feedback that we should go freemium, and I feel that it's not the case. And we tested it, and we get more traction, better LTV versus CAC ratio when we go via partners of Asana and Monday and upsell with them the use case, our use case. So a better Monday with us, okay? And that works really well because it's 1 to 10 sales. So I make an agreement with one partner and they upsell it to 10 clients.
Yeah.
The same point.
Yeah, no, that looks good. I mean, but the question you asked me was slightly different. The question you asked me was, am I going to impress the next investor on my growth rate that isn't monetized, or am I going to impress the next investor on my monetized top line? What I am saying is, I don't see how your business can be compared like for like with the B2C business on the growth rate alone of the unmonetized pool, because it is a more complicated sale. It might be through partners, but the use of it, the growth in the use of it, the number of deployments, the number of reseller relationships, the number of engagements, the number of automations, and within that, how many you were able to price, I think that is probably going to be more powerful. Like number of people who've installed, number of people who continue to use it, the increase in automations per customer, the latent value of that, what that can be monetized. Because then you're saying, look, this isn't for everyone. This is for a select group of people, which is still big, but it's very sticky, it's very valuable, and they're willing to pay up when it gets to a certain size. And I think that would be the story.
Understood. Yes. Thank you, Carlos.
Cool. Who's next?
Cool. We've got 4 hands raised up, and we've got, well, less than 10 minutes to go. So
let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, it's far.
Who's next?
Yeah, I guess that's me in the line. Hi, Carlos. Nina's here. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Codewell AI. We create digital assistants for companies in the banking, telco, and insurance sectors that actually automates communication with end customers and help them automate processes. I have a question on how do you agree upon the valuation methodology? Just to give you a bit of context, we are really early in the fundraising game, so we still haven't officially opened the rounds, preparing it, polishing the deck and everything. But we received a buyout offer from one of our partners, who is actually one of the biggest bank software providers in Europe. But we couldn't agree on the valuation with them because we were following, we did a research on startup valuation methodologies, and we proposed a few methodologies, but they were like, okay, we usually evaluate companies by EBIT. So I'm like, okay, that's not a standard methodology per se for evaluating a deep tech startup. But okay, let's go with EBIT, but then we didn't agree on the multiplier. So how do you actually find a mutual language for which startup valuation methodology to follow? Because I read a lot of blogs on the internet and watched dozens of videos on that, but still it's a mystery to me.
I mean, this is whole hour right here, that topic. So the easiest way to answer your question is to say, it doesn't sound to me like the person who's looking to invest as part of this has invested in many startups before, because the way that they're approaching it relative to the stage you are is disconnected. EBIT as a measure of valuation, as a multiple for valuation, typically is for companies that have been around for much longer and have much more stable earnings. And you can then kind of project outwards on those earnings. And there's analyst research that showcases kind of what decisions they've taken with cash, or, there's a whole bunch of things that go into that kind of valuation methodology. So I think the question is whether or not you will ever find a methodology that works for this particular investor. Like sometimes you have to realize when the gap is too big, and like you can over intellectualize things. You can be like, look, but there's this Black-Scholes model for option pricing. Like at some point the gap is too big, and it feels to me, just on the question and what they came back with, that gap might be too big. So me giving you an answer on how to negotiate a valuation is irrelevant, because fundamentally you're starting from two very different approaches. They're approaching it from a corporate historical growth rate, established revenue streams, discounted cash flow model, and you're approaching it from like, what can I be in the future? What can I be in 10 years? What can I be in 20 years? Which is, most of startup valuation is based on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I said, it wasn't like a VC or any investment fund per se. It was a software company that offered a buyout. Yeah,
I mean, for a buyout, how many of you in this room have been investment bankers in the past? Anyone? Natalia has. I mean, if you speak to investment bankers when you go with drinks with them or in dinner conversations, they'll tell you like a lot of deals are like, there's a price that the buyer and seller agreed to, and then a whole bunch of bankers that justify that price with math. That's a lot of how this happens, right? And so what you need to decide, if it is a buyout, you need to decide what is the price you want to sell at. Then you can justify it whichever way you want. Because at the end of the day, like it comes down to like some multiple of money invested, some multiple of what you want to earn, some like you can justify 500 different ways, but the problem is that there isn't. I think the biggest lesson I learned from how pricing in like a MBA class does things is that a lot of it's speculative. There isn't. It's what's it worth for the market today, and that changes every day. And so it's not. I know that you asked me a very specific question. How do I value this specific thing where they've given me one version of valuing it? Can you give me another? And I'm telling you, it sounds to me like the way they're approaching it, you cannot fight logic with logic. So you have to come up with something that you want and what your walkaway price is, and come up with a justification for it. And if they don't meet it, don't try to super argue it with intellectualization, because there isn't like a right answer there.
Right. Thank you.
Irina.
Okay.
Hello. I'll try to be as quick as possible. I'm Irina. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vont. Vont is a SaaS solution for residential real estate developers and real estate agencies that helps them streamline the management and sales of a residential project. We're at the stage that we build a product, we have revenue and clients. We've been bootstrapped so far. We want to raise our first round. I've talked to several VCs and I got 2 feedbacks. Your round is too low. Why not ask for more and scale? But we also want to see more international traction before that. And the second one of that is that I don't get your product, and then I find out that they have industry bias. Any tips to break industry bias or form a better story around this emerging sector, which is prop tech?
Yeah, so first of all, you can never get, I mean, we all know this from like just normal societal issues. It's very hard to convince people to change their biases. It's very hard. And we're talking about any kind of bias. The easiest place for you to start is to look for people who don't have this bias.
Okay, but
rather than
sorry for telling you that, but from what I've understood, basically for me, it would be to jump from a seed stage. And that for that, I need to provide more traction from what I understand.
Well, but hold that thought for a second. So there's 2 separate questions you're asking me. Who do I talk to that isn't biased and is going to like treat what I'm doing with a little bit more open-minded view? And then the second one is who, regardless of what I'm talking about, how do I explain where I am in that developmental journey relative to the money I want to raise? Those are the 2 questions. You've just merged them together. So the first one is you need to talk to specialized investors who know the space and can help you calibrate what traction looks like and what it would look like for your sector. So for example, I shared on this
They're gonna meet
if you look Concrete VC
during Spotlight, yeah.
Great. So like, for example, they have zero bias because they're in the space. So if they have zero bias, then it's around, what am I doing? Is it big enough? Is it interesting enough? Is it fast enough? So back to the discussion we were having with Sandro and previous other presentations and the market sizing one with Marion, it's like, okay, so I've removed one variable. This isn't a bias towards my industry. It is now, is this fast enough? Is this meaningful enough? Do these customers care? Do resellers care? Do the agencies care? That is the fundamental question, which then allows you to then go raise a round. And if it's a very painful process, then a prop tech investor will be super happy to invest. And what will happen is that for downstream, like what happens is that when a company is successful, all biases go away, right? Like that's the funny thing about anything in life. You know, like there was a billboard in the highway in Mexico when I was there visiting my parents, and it says, "There's no such thing as an ugly millionaire." And that's probably true, right? Like there's no such thing as a biased sector when that company's making 100 million annual recurring revenue. All of a sudden, every investor is like, "I love prop tech," you know? And so the question here is, what is it going to take for me to like graduate from this group of people who are unbiased to the larger group? But the only way that you're going to be able to calibrate that is by talking to those people like Concrete, who can then say, well, actually, even with my eyes, this still requires this or that or this or that. And so that's the best probably way to sort of get a better answer to your question.
Thank you so much.
So 3 more questions. Let's hear all 3 questions and let
crap, I got like 1 minute, Joanna. No, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do it justice, 3 questions, but maybe this is just a good chance to wrap up. Is there any question from you, Joanna, for me to wrap up?
So let's sum it up with what recommendations do you have for startups? Let's focus on C startups right now for the upcoming year.
Nice. Okay. So you guys are living in absolutely the best time to be a CE founder. And the reason is because the world has opened up to the fact that CE founders make some of the best and biggest companies in the world. And a lot of people feel like it's been an area that's been overlooked. And so there's a lot of new investors who are desperate to find what some people call diamonds in the rough. It's like there are tons of really great opportunities that they just haven't noticed because they weren't looking. Now, that means that for you, really the only thing is, can I eliminate all the variables that means I get a no in the conversation I had with Sandro? Can I eliminate those variables so that I know that when I am having those conversations, you capitalize on that opportunity? Because we're living in a time where you guys have the least bias. If anything, you have a positive bias. People want to hear from you. People want to see what you're building because they realize how many businesses have been built in the region that are of global impact. So I think it's more just about remembering that you're not like caught in whatever small region you think you might be in. You're actually a global player, and that global approach is what's going to get you funding.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carlos. What's the best way, if any, for the teams to Twitter, to find you, or to look out for?
Through Ioana.
Through Ioana. Great.
Well,
Thank you so
Bogdan.
much for your time. One more minute. That's it.
All right, guys. Bye. Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Guys, sorry you weren't able to ask your questions. Natalia, and if you're still here, you're not. So I'm not sure if it was. I'm not sure what your question was, Natalia.
But we can probably at least wrap them all up, and you can send Carlos the questions when we'll follow up to him. Maybe they will get a chance to actually have them answered somehow. Natalia, who was that?
Yeah.
Kenneth? Yeah, okay.
Should I ask those questions now here or send those separately?
As you wish. That would be an option, yeah, that we have at hand, actually sending him 3 lines, 3 questions.
I had very two straightforward questions. So do they have some Excel sheet where they put all the data and get those yes and no's, or it's a purely subjective decision, or it's a combination of something?
It's a combination of something.
Yeah, but then maybe on the proportion, what is the combination, and is it yeah? But and the second question is, does the Seedcamp also invest in competing or partly competing businesses?
So of course I cannot answer for Carlos, but as having worked within Seedcamp for several years, of course, being Seedcamp, obviously, as Carlos has mentioned, is fundraising. So every new fund has LPs and has investors that need to be aware of a collective decision somehow. So investing in a competitor is a very difficult decision, right? Because you're competing against your own,
bets.
The portfolio needs to grow, and you cannot be, happier for a company and sad for the other one because it's not that successful. So it's a super difficult decision to make.
Then why so many VCs are reaching us for what? We see their portfolios, we see that there is something that is might be compete with us somehow, and they're still reaching out and asking a lot of questions and so on. What is the reason behind that? Do you know?
I mean, this one was for Carlos in particular. Maybe
yeah, no, it's just for you follow up.
His insights would definitely be different than my insights in regards to that. Would have been a good question, and I'm not sure if this is something to be replied over email.
Yes.
But the decision is subjective. There are partnerships, and all this is a huge ecosystem. So you can have, there are angel investors who are investing in the fund. There are people who have their, stake in what's happening in regards to seeing a company. it might be not the case now, but it could be for future. It could be for something that's, you know, connected to the fund. It could be, you know, a recommendation that's made out of the interaction and the pitching to you. So it could not be as obvious as you know, as it is. It could be something else. They could just take the decision, as I said, as angel investors. So, you know, it could be something totally different than expected. And there could be differences in regards to, you know, if you look at a portfolio of a fund, there are tags there, right? So, you know, if you look at the AI companies and, you know, the health tech, and they're all in the same industry, but at the same time, there are differences. So, of course, it cannot be a direct competitor in regards to, you know, a huge percentage of matching. But if it's the same industry and there are particular differences, maybe they're interested in seeing what are those differences. So it will be good to highlight differences, and it's absolutely fantastic to look at the portfolio and go prepared with why you would be a great addition to their portfolio in regards to, you know, knowing the fact that they've got those companies in their already in their portfolio. So
yes, of course, one of the answers could be also maybe they are looking for some synergy for just their portfolio companies and some new companies. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, cool. I think that was it for now. We'll have all the other details on Slack, and you can drop us a line if you still want, or if you think, you know, another question. We'll probably email Carlos if we get the other questions from the guys. So if you do want to address this question, or so Ken is just for example just texted me with his question. So if you do think there's anything else, we'll try and reach out. I mean, we'll reach out to Carlos, and if he's got a bit of time, we'll see how to reply to that. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Bye. See you next week.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye, guys.